Hello everyone and welcome to the grand final of the Champions Chess Tour 2025. MVL has defeated Hikaru Nakamura and now gets a chance to face off against Magnus Carlsen. It's a really wild match for those of you who have seen it. Maybe you haven't analyzed the games as deeply, but yeah, it's again very hard to explain what happened here. Let's just check it out and then we're gonna discuss as usual. So this is the first game. Magnus has the white pieces. Let's see what happened. Magnus opens with pawn to e4, and you don't have to, I think for even a second to know what MVL will play. Of course, pawn to c5. He counters the e4 always with the Sicilian. Knight to f3, we have pawn to d6, knight to c3. Magnus does not opt for the open Sicilian, but rather goes knight c3. So maybe d4 is coming, maybe not. We'll see what MVL plays. We have knight to f6, and now pawn to h3. It's a very rare line, almost never played at the top level, but it's played by Hikaru Nakamura. For example, Hikaru played it a couple of times against none other than MVL here, and even Magnus Carlsen has employed it once. We have knight to c6, d4, we have captures, and now knight captures, pawn to e5, and knight to f3. You could also capture on c6, you could play knight to b3. Magnus goes knight to f3, we have pawn to h6, and bishop to c4. We have bishop to e6, and bishop to b3. Again, nothing out of the ordinary happening. Bishop to e7, we have castles, and now there is a game again against MVL. Any position where a Sicilian has been played at the top level, MVL probably has one game in that line. But Fabiano Caruana played Queen to e2 here against MVL in the Grand Chester Blitz Paris tournament of 2017. The game ended in a draw, but here we have rook to e1, deviating from that game. So rook to c8, we have knight to d5 by Magnus, and now bishop captures on d5. At that deviation point, it was as of that moment that we had a completely new game. Forgot to mention that. Captures, and knight to a5. Okay, perfectly fine position. You can see by the situation on the clock, MVL is well within his comfort zone. I mean, is the Sicilian, what do you expect? Bishop to a4, and now knight to d7. Maybe knight is coming to c5, but also you are making room for that f-pawn to be pushed forward to f5. So pawn to c3, now Magnus can bring the bishop back over to the c2 square, pawn to f5, and the bishop to c2. Queen to b6 by MVL, and now rook to b1. You want to develop the bishop, so you have to decide whether you want to go pawn to b3, or maybe, something else. Magnus goes for rook to b1 and rook to f7. MVL says, all right, I'm going to double up on the f-file. Magnus strikes with, not a3. He plays pawn to a4. We have queen to c7, and now Magnus strikes with pawn to g4. And this move is so spectacular that whatever you play, it's just not easy to parry. Even if you play pawn to f4, just bishop to g6 is extremely annoying. You could go something like rook to f6, then bishop goes back to d3, and okay, I mean, it's a nice position. You've improved your position a little bit. The queen can come to e4. You're gonna have some problems here, and there's not all that much to do for those rooks on the f-file. So instead, after pawn to g4, MVL played what is in fact the top move recommended by the engine, and that is f captures on g4. But the Magnus's position is already so good that it doesn't matter. H captures on g4, and now it's a very delicate position. You have to go knight to f8. You have to gain control over d squares with the knight, but MVL rushed it with rook to f8. He played it instantly within a second, and I'm probably going to use this for the thumbnail. So I thought about making a pause the video moment, but I'm going to use the other position for a pause the video moment. Here, Magnus played queen to d3. Just created a queen-bishop battery, and he sacrifices the knight on f3, and it doesn't matter if you capture or not. You could play pawn to g5 to guard the h7 square, but still, after knight h2, black's position is just really bad. There's no good way to prevent queen coming to g6. You might have some e4 and then knight e5 to control g6, but still, you already gave up material. White will strike with pawn to f4. Let's say captures, and it's a terrible position for black. It's still the best possible black can hope for. It's just very bad. However, after queen to d3, MVL accepted the knight, played queen, rook captures on f3, and now Magnus has a forced checkmate. It's actually a forced mate in 8 if, you know, you play a lot of nonsense moves that no one would ever play. So without saying, you know, a mate in how many, just checkmate the black king. What do you play here? Of course, it is queen to h7, but you have to see it all the way. King to f7, and now bishop to g6 with check. Only move for the black king, king f6, and now Magnus played bishop to h5, and he was in this position on move 24 that MVL resigned the game, as there is nothing more to be done here. Queen g6 will be mate in 1, and even if you free up, let's say, d7 square for the king, it doesn't matter. Queen g6 check, king e7, and queen to e6 will be checkmate. So, yeah, I mean, it's just like that. Magnus plays against MVL, probably the best Sicilian player in the entire world. A position that MVL has played hundreds, maybe thousands of times, and he just crushes him in a miniature of 24 moves. In game 2, MVL had white. The game 2 ended in a draw, and I will also show you game 3. So let's now go into game 3. In game 3, you would think, okay, Magnus crushes MVL in a miniature. He would probably repeat pawn to e4, hoping for another Sicilian. But no, Magnus mixes it up, pawn to d4. And we all know what MVL plays against pawn to d4. Something, you know, as close to a Najdorf you could possibly get against a d4 opening, and that is the Gruenfeld defense. So he goes knight f6, we have pawn to c4, g6, knight to c3, and pawn to d5. We have knight to f3, bishop to g7, and captures. So again, very standard stuff. Pawn to e4, this is the exchange variation of the Gruenfeld. Knight captures, b captures, and pawn to c5. So even, you know, even like a dragon, we could say. And here there are 3 variations that are played. The most played is rook to b1, then bishop to e3, and the third most popular is what Magnus goes for, and that is bishop to b5 check. Okay, still third most popular against the Gruenfeld is still the main line, knight to c6, we have castles by both players, and bishop to e3. We have bishop to g4, and now d5 is one of the moves that is usually played here. Bishop captures on c6, another one. Sometimes they play d captures on c5, but Magnus opts for pawn to d5. It is a pawn sacrifice, but you get quite a lot for this pawn. So knight e5, we have bishop back to e2, not allowing the position to open up on the king side. Knight captures, bishop captures, queen captures, and now MVL gobbles up the pawn. Bishop captures on c3, but it is not a free pawn. We have rook 8 to b1, going after b7, pawn to b6, and now Magnus goes bishop captures on c5, which also opens up an attack on the bishop on c3. So rook 8 to c8, now attacking the bishop on c5 with the rook as well. And maybe Magnus was trying to avenge his good friend Daniil Dubov here, as there is a game where Dubov played bishop to e3, and he lost that game. So Magnus goes bishop to a3. We have queen to d7, and now again there is a game where rook f to c1 was played by Jinchi. No, rather Yan Lu played it against Bai Jinchi in the 2017 Chinese Championship, and the game ended by black winning. But here Magnus does not go rook f to c1, he goes rook b to c1, and it is now as of move 18 that we have a completely new game. So okay, we have bishop to e5, and now pawn to g3, limiting the power of the bishop on e5. MVL trades off a pair of rooks, captures, and again pawn to f5. We have rook to c6 by Magnus, beautifully activating the rook. F captures on e4, we have queen captures, and bishop to d6, offering a trade of bishops as well. And Magnus happily accepts. We have bishop captures, e captures on d6, and now just pawn to h4. And there are a couple of ways MVL could handle this position, like rook to f5. You know that Magnus will go after the d6 pawn, so you might as well go after the d5 pawn. But no, MVL played rook to e8, and he blundered a pawn. Just not playing this game all that well. Magnus captures on d6, where you could keep the queens on the board, or you could keep the rooks on the board. Here we have rook captures on e4, rook captures, and now MVL is hoping that he will hold this position being down a pawn, and then he will get his chances in game 4, where he will have the white pieces. We have rook to d4, and now king to g2. So it's rook endgame. Magnus is up a pawn, it's a pass d pawn, And objectively, the position is completely winning. Now the question is, can Magnus win it against MVL? We have pawn to a5, king f3, we have pawn to b5, MVL also pushing to create a passed pawn on the queen side. King to e3. We have rook to d1 and king to e4. We have rook to d2, going after the a2 and f2 pawns, pawn to a3. And not all that much for you to do here. You could play a4, maybe play b4 next to create a passed a pawn, or you play b4 to create a passed b pawn. MVL decided to capture on f2, but that means Magnus gets a move to go after the queenside pawns. We have pawn to b4. A captures, and now pawn to d6. Magnus just advances the passed pawn, rook to d2, putting the rook behind the passed pawn, and king to e5. Now, of course, the next move is capturing the pawn on b4, king to f8, and the rook captures on b4. Again, it's one pawn, but this is objectively winning. We have rook to e2 with check, king to d5, rook to d2 check, king to e6, and now rook to e2 with check. We have king to d7 and pawn to h5, hoping to hold Magnus to a draw here, but king to d8. We have rook to e3 going after the g3 pawn, pawn to d7, and not much for MVL to do here. He will grab one pawn. Now he equalized the material, but it is far too late. Rook to f4 with check, king to g7, and here rook to d4, and it was in this position on move 43 that Maxime Vachier-Lagrave resigned the game, as there is nothing more to be done here. Whatever you try, there is always a square for the white king. It doesn't matter where you go rook e3, king to c8. If rook to c3 with check, you will go king to b7. And, well, there's only one move that needs to be made for the queen to enter the game. So that means, you know, once you give a couple of checks, the king will just march down the board, and that's it. There's no way to stop promotion. You will have to play rook to b8, and then you just trade the rook for the pawn, and of course completely winning for Magnus. So of course MVL will not play this. After rook d4, he resigned the game, and that's pretty much it. So Magnus obliterates MVL in game 1. In game 3, he didn't do all that much, but MVL gave him a pawn, and that's enough for Magnus. And by winning 2 games out of 3, that means Magnus wins the match without even going to game 4, and that means Magnus wins another Champions Chess Tour event, and as there were only 2 of them this year, that means Magnus has won 100% of them. So yeah, everyone was expecting Hikaru in the finals, but MVL disposed of Hikaru. He faced Magnus, but yeah, you have to show a lot more if you are to beat Magnus, you know, in any event, you know, in a barn game, you know, where no one is watching. I'm pretty sure he would be playing very, very seriously. In a top event like this, yeah, no way. So that's the game. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Beautifully played by both of them, but it is Magnus again. Yeah, it's just funny how Magnus, you know, he knows MVL is strongest in any Sicilian, but basically, yeah, in the Sicilian and in Gruenfeld, and that's exactly where Magnus wanted to beat him. He found exactly what he thought, you know, would give him the greatest chance. And that's exactly what happened. So yeah, you know, it's not as if he's only playing freestyle. He also prepares something, you know, a little bit for everything, even though, okay, this is rapid, this is not classical, but yeah. Just very nicely done. Magnus playing just beautiful chess, and it's spectacular to watch. So I hope you enjoyed it. I would like to thank Douglas Van Banhuisen, Samuel Kamuli, Nidil Kumar, Marcus Shib, and Mariusz Klimek for your contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing to check up on your wonderful suggestions and whatever else happens in the chess world. Thank you all. I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day.